everybody, happy Friday afternoon if you're on the East Coast, or Friday morning if you're on the West Coast, or somewhere in between. All right, hey, Friday. Woo! What are we doing? We're coming to the end. This is the last competency. The last competency. Now, side note, I might just, everybody's always talking to me about communication and things like that, so we might have a session add-on. Do that or not, we'll see. But it won't be anything formal. We'll just put it up on the web for you. We'll broadcast it, and then you can watch if you want. So what does this mean? It means we got 3 weeks left, right? We got 3 weeks left of this 15-week journey. Now, some of you got an email from me saying, hey, how's your one thing coming along? And thank you for those of you that responded. Others of you got an email saying, hey, where the hell's your one thing? We got, 3.5 weeks left or whatever. Where's your one thing? Either one of those emails you got, let me know. If you haven't picked out one thing, you still got time. But for those of you that have, I appreciate those that sent me a note to tell me how your one thing is going. Because I sent some notes out saying, how's it going? How's it going? How's it going? Give me an update. Give me an update. Because I really do care. I really do want to know how your one thing is coming along. Because I don't want to waste your time, and you don't want to waste my time, and we don't want to waste each other's time. We're serious about this. You play an important role in your society. You play an important role in your community. You play an important role within your department. As a mid-level leader, you're key. And so we all committed that we were going to be better at least one thing by the end of this 15 weeks. Well, there's 3 weeks to go, three and a little bit weeks to go. And so we're coming down to crunch time. But for those of you that haven't picked one thing out, you still got some time. Another note, remember that this information is going to be available to you till all the way till January 1st. So it's information you can come back to. In addition to that, if you wanted to take another track, you could. All right, so what are we doing today? So we're talking about continuously improving. Oh, continuous improvement. We hear it all the time. Look, we're going to drill into this thing because it's the last competency of today's effective leader. Remember the point that we made it from the beginning, that we're in a time of transformation, that things have definitely changed, that every couple hundred years in Western history, society rearranges itself. And the society the grandparents knew is completely different than the society the grandchildren know. Remember that quote from Drucker? So then what are the leadership approaches that times require? Well, one of the leadership approaches that times require, I think, is we've got to be able to adapt and overcome. Adapt and overcome. We've got to be able to adapt and overcome. Staying the same, we think there's safety and security in that. That we'll bust our ass, excuse my language, for 25 years of our lives, and then we'll get everything in our lives to where it just stays the same. And then that's safety, and there's security in that. Well, there's no safety and security in that. And I say that because if you look across nature, if you look in the universe, if you look in life, there is nothing that supports that argument. Not one thing where things stay the same. Nothing. You can email me if you want. There's nothing. Even the strongest stone erodes. Things are either expanding or contracting. There's either the building of strength or atrophy. I mean, that's life. So this idea that we'll create a situation where things stay the same, that's just a false premise. Well, what does that have to do with me? Well, it has to do with the lie. And we got the handouts are out of order here. So the survey should be second. The survey should be second. Well, really, I don't know if it should be second or not. But anyways, I'm going to go back and forth between page 1 and page 2. So there's this lie. A lie that you, a lie that me, a lie that we've all bought into. That's detrimental at any time, let alone a time of extreme transformation. And it's one of the reasons that we can't do well in a time of transformation or a time of change, especially we as leaders. And the lie is this, that things staying the same is ideal, That is perfection. Let's get to a place, that's utopia. Let's get to a place where things stay the same. And so we drive to that. There's no safety and security in things staying the same. Look at this quote. There's only safety and security in learning to adapt, overcoming, and continuously improving. If one can establish continuously improving as a part of their being, they dramatically increase their chances of personal security. Huh? Your personal security in your workplace, in your financial situation, in life in general, is enhanced to the degree, let me say this a different way. Your personal security, your ability to make it, chances increase significantly to the degree that you can overcome and you can adapt. The greater your adaptability, the greater your personal security. The greater your ability to deal with change, the greater your safety. But we don't think that. We think I'm going to fight to get to a place where I can create a stable situation. Now, I'm not against stability. That's why I preach systems thinking, creating systems and protocols and processes. What I'm saying, though, is staying the same is failure from its beginning. You know, this whole idea that I'll work my butt off and then, boink, one day I'll make it. I've made it. I'm all good. It's all good. I've made it. That's not the case. Just talk to those lottery winners who are broke today. So this idea of continuous improvement is about getting ahead of that curve. Ahead of the curve, what do you mean? Getting ahead of external pressures that force us to change. Tragedy, difficulty, financial pressures, and other things that force us to change. Controlling our own destiny and our own situation to whatever degree possible. And saying to ourselves, you know what? I know change is coming, so let us just continually improve. I'll give you a prime example. Prime example of that is our charity, our Let Them Be Kids charity. Always on the leading edge, always on the leading edge, always on the leading edge. Won awards for being on the leading edge. Social Innovator of the Year, foremost innovative programs in the world, all this stuff. Guess what? We've gotten behind. Huh? Yeah, and some of the things we're doing, we've actually gotten behind. Why? Because we rested on our laurels and we didn't continuously improve. We weren't pushing the envelope every day. Yeah, but I Googled it, Ian. It's pretty amazing, the stuff you guys have done. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. There's no doubt it's pretty amazing. But look what it says right there at the top. Once you think you've arrived, you've already begun your descent. Once you think you've arrived, you've already begun your descent. So I know it on a very personal level. You probably know it if you think it all the way through. You get it to a place where you think it's good to go, and then you realize within a few short months, years, whatever, you're actually behind. How do you stave that off? How do you prevent that? You instill in your toolkit this idea of continuously improving. This idea that it's in my best interest to break it, to fix it, even if it's not broken, right? Sounds counterintuitive. Now, whether I'm a leader, and you're talking about this in the context of leading others within your department, or whether I'm talking about me personally or you personally. Look down at the bottom of that second page. It is not necessary to change because survival is not mandatory. It is not necessary to change. You don't have to change. That's fine. Because survival is not mandatory. Rigidity, especially in times of transformation, is a killer. You know, we always talk about, or tragically, I guess, we've had to talk about over the last few years, real natural disasters. I mean, horrific natural disasters. From tornadoes, to hurricanes, to tsunamis, wildfires. I mean, it's crazy, right? It's, you know, that pestilence kind of stuff, right? It's just like, you know, rah, crazy, crazy, crazy kind of stuff. And we think of it in terms of, gosh, these must be some of the greatest tragedies that have ever occurred, until we do an exploration of history. You look at the turn of the century in San Francisco, California, the turn of the last century, in San Francisco, California. They had a big earthquake. You may be familiar with it. And I mean, Jeff, thousands of people died. So many people died, they stopped counting the people that died. It was crazy. Horrific. The whole city leveled in this earthquake. So the people of San Francisco, as they began to rebuild, they were like, wow, the earth is going to shake again. We just happen to live in a place where the earth is going to shake. And we like living here. We're not going to move. And we're going to rebuild this thing. But we're going to rebuild it in a way that anticipates the earth shaking again. So in the 100 years following, there was always this drive to find a way to build buildings that could survive earthquakes and design a city that would be able to adapt and overcome when the ground shakes. And I'm making it very simplistic now, but the buildings and the reason they all tumbled was because they weren't constructed in such a way that would take into account the earth shaking. They were rigid. Now if you go to San Francisco, they take into account what? The buildings, I mean. What do they take into account? They take into account the ground is going to shake. And so the building has the ability to adapt, overcome the shaking. Or at least it mitigates the risk of tumbling down because they've anticipated some things. The ground is going to shake. When it shakes, the building needs to be able to adapt. What do we learn from that, you and me? Well, guess what? The ground's going to shake. And whether that is because there's going to be a 25% cut in the budget, or whether that's going to be because you have a tragedy in a personal life, whether that's going to be because somebody is diagnosed with a horrific disease, or whether that's because all of a sudden you've got an employee that's turning things upside down. The ground's going to shake in life, y'all. The ground's going to shake. And if you have become too rigid, not in your principles and values, I'm not talking about your principles and values, in your approach, then you're going to have a tough time. You're going to struggle. You are going to struggle. However, if you have flexibility, adaptability, if you have the wherewithal to overcome, then you're going to make it. So this idea of continuous improvement knows that the ground is going to shake. The ground will shake. So I'm not going to wait for the ground to shake to be getting myself better. I'm going to take it upon myself to get me and my people and the way we do things better anyways. It's not going to take my wife or husband yelling at me to get better. It's not going to take my boss yelling at me to get better. It's not going to take the commissioner or the taxpayers or everybody else to get on our backs to help make us better. We're just going to get better because we know the ground is going to shake. Now, here's the funny thing about that lie that I articulated a moment ago. Here's the funny thing about it. We in Western society have bought into that lie. But there are a number of other societies you look at throughout history that didn't buy into the lie. The ancient Greeks, they didn't buy into the lie. The ancient Greeks weren't walking around saying, oh, I made it. The ancient Greeks were saying this, earte. They were saying that in the body and the mind and the spirit, I've got to continuously improve. I'm going to make a blanket statement here that's going to make everybody upset. But you know what? Obesity is an epidemic in North America. It's an epidemic. Did you know that within the next 10 years, the majority of kids will be obese? The majority of people under the age of 18 will be obese. The majority. It won't be the minority. It'll be the majority of kids. So somewhere along the way, we lost this concept of the ancient Greeks that said, let us improve ourselves in mind, body, and spirit. Let us move towards enlightenment. Somewhere along the way, we lost that. I'll tell you where we lost it, when we bought into the lie. Let's relax. Let's kick back. Because things are good. So let's just let's just relax. Or how about the ancient Asian cultures like the Chinese? There was no honor in staying the same. No, there was an honor in becoming sharper and crisper, and gaining more wisdom and gaining more enlightenment. Or how about the ancient Hebrew culture? Sojourning through life. As I sojourn through a life, and I grow in knowledge, and I grow in appreciation, and I grow in insight, and I grow in wisdom, that there was no honor in staying as educated as you were at 18 and having the same education or knowledge, or maybe a better term is knowledge, having the same knowledge at 18 as you had at 48. There was no honor in that. So that they knew and understood that if you wanted to have a civil society, people had to be growing. You want an even more tangible example? Stagnant water, man. Stagnant water. You're on fire today, Ian. I am. Stagnant water. Water flows in and it doesn't flow out. It becomes stagnant and it stinks to high heaven. It's a breeding ground. It's a cesspool. How does that relate back to our discussion today? How many people do you know that have stopped growing? They've stopped growing in mind. They've stopped growing when I say growing, I mean physically improving themselves, and they've stopped growing spiritually. They've stopped growing. And they're going nowhere. And then you just lump that over a society. And you wonder why. Because we don't understand the concept of continuously improving. Somewhere we bought into a lie that says, let's just work our butts off to get to a place where everything stays the same. That there's nowhere in physical laws of nature that applies. Nowhere. So this idea of continuously improving. Like I said, I'm going to go back and forth between the first 2 pages. Continuously improving. Which means that I'm proactive. I make it a part of my being. I'm just getting better because I'm getting better. Because there's nobility and honor in that. Craftsmanship. If I worked wood 400 years ago, or brass 2,000 years ago, or stone 3,000 years ago, I was a craftsman. And I perfected my craft. And there was honor in that. Do we have craftsmen today? I don't know. Today, you make it big by getting your YouTube video up. And everybody watches it and there's 10 million hits. And then you make money just because you make money and you're famous for being famous. And we all look at that and say, okay, let's do that. I don't know, man. How long does that sustain? I don't know if that sustains, man. So for you, continuous improvement. Now we'll do the self-survey in a second. Well, let's do the self-survey now. Just go through it very quickly. So, continuous improvement, the competency. Today's leader practices ongoing personal and professional growth and development, that it's an integral part of your being. Why? So that I can adapt and overcome. That no matter what my situation is, I can drop in and lead. That's one of the things that when I set out to be a leader, I said to myself, I want to be able to drop into any situation and lead. Because guess what? I'll always have a job. I'll always have a job. Even if the whole world shakes around me, I'll get a job. And then once I get a job, I'll be able to move up because I can lead. Now, I'm not saying that arrogantly, but I set out to learn how to lead because I knew that in any environment, I'd be able to find a job and that there was safety and security in that. So, the competency practices ongoing personal and professional growth and development. The indicators. I have and practice an ethical code of conduct. Do you have a code of conduct that you operate by? I'm able to articulate my values. Are you a 1? Are you a 10? Are you somewhere in between? I adhere to organizational codes of conduct, core values, professional code of ethics, and the like. I have a professional development plan. There's an old proverb that says, where there is no vision, people perish. Where there is no vision, people perish. When I don't have a direction or a purpose in my life, then life becomes a series of Wednesdays. Who wants to follow that guy? Who wants to give their allegiance to that guy or that gal who has no idea where they're going or what they're doing? That's the whole point of life's 5 most urgent questions, because leaders have to have a place they're going before they can ever help anybody else. I have a healthy life balance, mind, body, spirit. I'm working on all of it. Now, that's not religious. That's just practical. That's not religious. That's just practical. To say, you know what? I'm probably made up of three things. I got a mind. I got a body. And then I got something that's not tangible. You could call it a spirit. And then I got to work on all three of those things. I'm able to present myself using a format that best identifies my skills, my knowledge, my attributes, and my experience. I'm knowledgeable about my heritage and learning, and the learning it has provided. I promote the value of learning for myself and others. I initiate and maintain networks with other practitioners, service providers, community leaders, whatever. You can fill in whatever words you want there. Other professionals. I actively seek information, resources, and opportunities that will enhance my knowledge and widen my perspective. That's that craftsman, right? I'm a craftsman. See, there's a big difference between a guy who's trading time for money and a professional. See, you're leaders, so I would assume you're professionals. You're not just trading time for money. I seek and participate in opportunities for mentoring. I participate in new opportunities and ways to improve and grow. I place a priority on scanning for trends and issues and promising practices. I want to be on the leading edge, so I'm always out there digging things up, finding out, what's the new way. Now, again, not changing my principles and values, just looking around and asking the question that I've asked you to ask yourself many times. How have things around me changed, and what are the leadership approaches that times require? What are the leadership approaches that times require? Okay. So that's the self-survey. Put it away. Now back to that second page that we've been jumping back and forth from. So we've all heard about continuous improvement. You've heard it. Someone talked about it. You've been in the game long enough. Somebody's talked to you about it. But why don't we do it? Why do things stay the same? Why do we not continuously improve? Well, first, the lie. The lie. That thing, we're going to drive to get things to stay the same, and then once it stays the same, that's the ideal, and we've gotten to excellence and perfection. It's all good, and so we can relax. That's one. Two, it's dressed in overalls and looks like work. What? Continuous improvement is dressed in overalls and looks like work. It takes work to continuously improve. But I would suggest to you, once you've made it a part of the culture of an organization, it takes less work than to react to crisis. Now, that doesn't mean you eliminate crisis completely. It just means you mitigate it significantly because you're continually improving long before the crisis comes. And so you're best positioned to deal with it, both personally and professionally and as an organization. Why else? Well, finally, I think that there's stressors and pressures that prevent us from it. I think that there's all kinds of things working against us continuously improving. I think, frankly, just sometimes we're tired. We're just tired. We're just tired. And we make some personal choices that contribute to us being tired, the way we eat, the way we sleep, the way we drink, what we do. And then there's just some external pressures that are beyond our control that just make us tired. And so we say to ourselves, oh, I should get up and do that walk. Oh, I'm tired. I should really read that book. I'm tired. I should really spend some time with my spouse. I don't want to do that. I'm tired. And so all of those things that would help us continuously improve, we don't do because we're just tired. So I think there's a number of reasons why things don't improve. So what do we do about that? That's the key. What do we do about that? Well, first, I think you got to start with where did the concept come from? A guy named Deming. Deming, business guru, innovator, philosopher, statistician, academic. Deming. So Deming is this guy, statistician, innovator, business lecturer. And after World War II, the United States government calls him up and says, hey, Deming, we want you to go over to Japan. And Deming's like, well, what do you want me to do? Well, we want you to go to Japan. A little slow there, Jeffrey. We want you to go to Japan, and we want you to help them rebuild their manufacturing sector. Deming's like, huh? Yeah, we want you to rebuild the manufacturing sector. He said after World War II, the manufacturing sector of Japan was destroyed. And if a country's going to make it, they got to have industry. And so we got to rebuild their manufacturing and help them get up off the ground. And Deming was like, okay. So Deming heads over to Japan. And as he's trying to build ideas and concepts and strategies to rebuild their manufacturing sector, he stumbles on something in the Japanese culture, a concept. And the concept was a thing called Kaizen. Now what's funny is you can say Kaizen, Kaizen. I don't know how you pronounce it. My wife speaks Japanese because she lived over there for a year, doing business over there for a year. And she always says I pronounce it wrong. That's fine. So Kaizen, whatever. What's more important is the concept. And the concept was that you continually got better. As an individual, as a society, we're going to continually get better. That there was nobility and honor in that. And there was a lot to it, but that's the simplicity of it. And so Deming looks around and says, well, wait a minute now. So you're telling me we should get better, a product should get better without a customer complaining? Yeah. So you mean that I should, as an individual, get better without my wife complaining about me? Yeah. So you're saying that I should be disciplined enough to be moving myself to as good as I can be without external pressures? Yeah. And Deming's like, wow, what if we took that and instituted it in the manufacturing process? That we were constantly looking for ways to improve. That we were constantly challenging the status quo. That we were constantly, how much more profitable would we be, he said. How much less stress would there be in the workplace? Wow, that'd be really cool. So he took the concept and brought it into the manufacturing sector and had tremendous success. Then he brought it back to the United States in the manufacturing sector when the manufacturing sector in the United States was at its pinnacle. A part of that was Deming. And these concepts of continuously improving. That we're going to try to make the assembly line a little bit better, we're going to try to make the process a little bit better, we're going to try to make the systems a little bit better, and then we're going to create systems to continuously improve. So it's not reactive, it's proactive. It's like in San Francisco. We're not going to wait for the next earthquake to come to make better buildings. We're just going to be continually making better buildings. Because we know the earth is going to shake at some point. So that's where it came from. Listen to what Deming said, the deadly leadership diseases. A lack of consistency and purpose. Where there is no vision, people perish. That old proverb. That's what Deming was saying. If we don't have clarity of purpose, that's a deadly disease. Life's 5 most urgent questions is clarity of purpose. Or when we talked about building pride this past week, and we talked about organizational pride and explaining to employees what we're about and where we're going and why we do what we do and why it's important. Consistency of purpose. He said where there's a lack of consistency and purpose, you might as well forget about continuously improving. Emphasis on short-term gains. Isn't it funny that our whole Western society, all of North America, even all you people in Australia, we're just all about the short-term gain. We don't think about the long term. Bad deal. Some people on the planet, they plan for 1,000 years, dude. Are you kidding me, Jeff? I'm planning for like the next 8 seconds. And we got people on the planet, societies on the planet, that are planning for the next 1,000 years, or at least the next 100 years. They got 100-year plans. Third, mobility of management. If there's all kinds of change in leadership, forget about continuously improving. Now it says, he was speaking in the context of a for-profit situation, running a company on visible figures alone. In other words, his point was, you can't just run it by the numbers. Now I know all of us in this sector are challenged with that right now. But we got to do the best that we can to advocate that that's not the best approach. Because we talk about cutting the public works sector today, but we're going to have a big price tag down the road when all of our infrastructure fails. That's a bad idea, man. That's short-sighted. Neglecting long-range planning. We made that point. Seeking examples to follow rather than developing solutions. See, continuous improvement is about us horsepowering our own. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't borrow and steal other people's ideas. Of course we do. Of course we do. But we also innovate internally. Remember when we talked about how do we think outside the box and creating a pattern of thinking to that extent? Excuses such as, well, our problems are different. Our problems are different. Our situation's unique. Really? Is it that unique? Maybe where you are, your size, some of that's unique, but the inherent why behind the problem, remember the 3 reasons why employees don't perform? Those transcend all lines, all communities, all departments, all agencies. So really, is your problem that unique? Maybe not. Placing blame on workforces who are only responsible for 15% of the mistakes where the system desired by management is responsible by 85% of the unintended consequences. In other words, what he's saying here is that organizations blame their employees for poor performance when usually it's leadership and the systems that leadership has put into place that contribute to that poor performance. Remember, you've heard me say it before. Organizations get better as soon as leaders do. Our organization, it's amazing how the performance of our organization is directly tied to how dumb or smart I am. In other words, the realization that when I institute poor systems, we have poor performance. And it's not the employee's fault. Oftentimes it's the leader's fault. It's my fault that people don't do what they're supposed to do, right? We talked about that. You got to own it as a leader. Excuse me. Okay, turn the page. Final thought from Deming. Here's what he said. He said that the quality had an equation. He said when people in organizations focus primarily on quality, defined by the following ratio, quality tends to increase and costs fall over time. However, when people in organizations primarily focus on costs tend to rise and quality declines. Now I know I might be preaching to the choir when we talk about budgets and efficiencies and things of that nature and cutting costs. But it's something to put into your toolkit and your verbiage. And you might want to do a little Google search on his concepts here. The next time you stand up in a budget dialogue or your director or you're providing information for your director to stand up in a budget dialogue. This equation holds true, very true. Regardless of your title or your responsibilities, you're a professional. And as a professional, you must continually improve, period. So I want to start the concept with talking about some steps that you could take to take this idea of continuously improving and making it a part of your professional toolkit or creating an environment for it within the organization. First, I want you to list 3 resources that you could use to continuously improve. What are 3 resources that you could use? Is it your boss? Is your boss a resource that you could go to help you get better? And do you utilize that delegation matrix upwards? Where you go to your boss and you say to your boss, I'd like some clarity in what I can do on my own and what I need your help with? Do you manage your boss? That's a big one. Learning to manage your boss is a big one. Are there some peers within your organization that you could turn to as a resource to continuously improve? Remember when we were doing the change continuum, we talked about who in your life have you given permission to tell you what to do? Who is it in your life that you've given permission to? So is there some peers that you could talk with? Aretha Franklin, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Luciano Pavarotti, Jack Nicholson. Any of these, Jack Nicklaus. Any of these world-class performers who were some of the best at their chosen vocation. All of them had a coach. All of them had somebody that they could turn to and say, how am I doing? And then they listened to their feedback and did something with their feedback. I know a group of old guys. They've been meeting for 30 years for breakfast every Friday morning. Every Friday morning for 30 years, these old guys have been meeting. You know what's funny about those 30 guys, or those guys that have been meeting for 30 years? They're all like millionaire successful business guys. But when they first started meeting 30 years ago, they weren't. They knew that they needed a close group of people that they could be transparent with, honest with, and it could give each other feedback and hold them accountable. It's a brilliant strategy, Jeff. Brilliant strategy. I tried to hone my way into the group, and they weren't going for that. They weren't going for that. They weren't going for it because they had their little group. And there's something special about that, isn't it? Especially in today's society when we have throwaway relationships. What's your point? Okay, so your boss could be a resource. Your peers, whether within the four walls of your organization or outside the four walls of your organization, who have you given permission to tell you what to do? And then, or it could be a resource. And then finally, what organization or group could be a resource for continuous improvement? Let alone what book, what tape, whatever could be a resource for continuous improvement. That's why I mentioned what I mentioned about this program and that all of it's going to be available to you to January 1st, 2013, because it could be a resource for you for continuous improvement if you took the director's track or if you came back to some of this information. At the end of the day, though, the ground is going to shake. Huh? Yeah, the ground's going to shake. So how are you preparing for the ground to shake? How are you preparing to overcome and adapt? What are you doing? Don't be a lemming. Come on. Don't be a lemming who's foolish enough to think that the world's not going to change or the ground's not going to shake. That's just dumb. That's stupid. 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 You don't want to be that. So you look out over the horizon, you know the ground's going to shake, so you're continuously improving yourself. I'm too tired. Yeah, we're all tired. I'm too beat up. Well, we're all a little beat up. But if you really want to have safety and security, it comes from creating a proactive plan to continuously improve. And whether that's your physicality, or whether that's your mind, or whether that's your quote-unquote spirit, whatever it is, that intangible thing in your life. What are the three resources? Okay, what are three actions? What are three actions? One action might be calling that person on the phone that you really respect and saying, do you mind if we sat down once a month that I can talk to you? See, now don't buy into the lie. See, some of you, you're already buying into the lie. The lie that says, why would I do that? Things are pretty good. Why would I do that? Things are okay. Why would I do that? That'd be a sign of weakness. Why would I do that? You do that because the ground's going to shake. And that's what wisdom is. Preparing for a day you hope will never come. That's the whole idea of continuous improvement. You don't wait for the complaint. You're continuously improving you and your organization. So what are the three actions? You could call somebody and make that appointment, right? Or you could sign up for that program 6 months from now. So you did this program, and then what's going to be the program 6 months from now? Or a year from now? What's going to be that thing? Or you could schedule, you could take some of the training that we've been doing, and you could take that and use it again with your people. Maybe the frontline track, you could take a video here or a concept there or a handout there and use it over the coming year. That's an action you could take. Or is there something you could buy? So the resources have to transition into some actions. Have to transition into some actions. You're going to take 15 minutes a day and commit to looking up on the University of Google like we've talked about? What are you going to do? Because all this conceptual talk in 1, 2, and 3 doesn't do any good unless it's tied to 4, 5, and 6. That's why it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I got these resources I can turn to. What am I going to do with them? Well, I'm going to take some action on those resources. I'm going to tap into those people, those organizations, or those groups that are going to help me continuously improve. And here's the actions I'm going to take to tap into them. I'm going to have a meeting. I'm going to read a book. I'm going to go to I'm going to have a cup of coffee, whatever. So that's why it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then finally, list 3 steps you're going to take to help your department continually improve. What are 3 steps you're going to take to help your department continually improve? Remember, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. So you can't tell me that one of the 3 things is stuff you're already doing, because that won't help you improve. Right? If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. So don't regurgitate things that you've already done, because that won't help you improve. So what could you do? Well, you could have a meeting with your employees where you talk to them about what they're going to do, because I had the same dialogue earlier this morning with them. Maybe a slightly different slant on it, but in its essence, it was the same. So one of the things you could do to help your department continue to improve is have a meeting with them or have a chat with them, get their ideas, their thoughts. Or maybe one of the things you could do to help your department continually improve is actually set up that delegation matrix with your people. Or maybe one of the things you could do to help your department continually improve is set up a pride strategy. We're going to intentionally and strategically build pride. But what are you going to do? What are the steps? List 3 steps you could take to help your department continuously improve. Come on, guys. You know, it's up to us. We're the leaders. Well, my boss. Well, I don't know about your boss. Remember, just because your boss stinks as a leader does not absolve you of the responsibility to be a great leader. Now, I know you can be a great leader, and many of you are great leaders. But times have changed, and is your approach the ones that times require? Okay, so list 3 resources. Write them down. List 3 actions. Write it down. List 3 steps. And remember, the reason it says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 isn't because that was a mistake. It's because they link together. The resources and the action. I got these resources, now I got to take advantage of the resources. All right, turn the page. Okay, we got about 17 minutes left. So if we're going to continuously improve, here's another concept we got to think about. Individual responsibility, collective accountability. Individual responsibility, collective accountability. Individual responsibility, collective accountability. So you and I are individually responsible as leaders. We're responsible for helping employees perform at their best. We're responsible for clarifying expectations, providing the tools, and making sure there's clarity between what people have a choice in and what they don't have a choice in. We're also individually responsible to the taxpayer, to our directors, to our commissioners, to citizens we'll never meet and we'll never see. To do what? To be great stewards of the public resources. To be great stewards of the public resources. Citizens are trusting us to make the most of what we've been given, to find new and innovative and creative ways. And we can live out the spirit of that, or we can live out the letter of that. And the greatness of our society, a portion of the greatness of our society, is in the balance of that decision, whether you're going to live out the spirit of that or the letter of that concept of being great stewards of the public trust. We're individually responsible. However, we're collectively accountable. When somebody in the department does something dumb, that's a reflection on all of us in the department. When somebody within the public works sector across North America does something dumb, we're all going to be held accountable for that. That stinks. I know. It sucks. When somebody, does something dumb within the public sector, that paints all of us in the public sector with that brush. That sucks. I know. But that's a reality. We are individually responsible, and unfortunately, for right or wrong, good or bad, we're collectively accountable because we get lumped in, good and bad. Individually responsible, collectively accountable. Here's the funny thing. We tend to judge ourselves on our intentions, but we judge others on their actions. Now stop and think about that for a second. When I look at my employees, and they look at me, I know for a fact that I often judge them, I do judge them on their actions. I look and say, that performance was below standard, or I say, that performance was at or above standard. And I think you probably have hung out with me now for 12 weeks. You probably know that I say that. Either that was below standard, or that was above or at or above standard. And I think you guys have gotten to know me well enough to know I say that. I do, because people need clarity. Now, how about for myself? Well, oftentimes, when I look introspectively, I don't judge myself in the same way. I judge myself on this. Well, I meant to send that email. Well, I meant to correct that handout. Oh, yeah, of course I meant to. I meant to make that phone call. It's like the other day. I meant to pick up the dog poop, but I didn't. And so when my wife walked out into the backyard and unknowingly stepped in the dog poop, how many of you know that there was hell to be paid? There was hell to be paid. Absolutely. Because the day before was my dog poop day. It was my dog poop day, and I didn't do it. But I meant to do it. I absolutely had all the right intentions to pick up the dog poop. There was only one challenge. I didn't, and so she stepped in it in an early morning as the sun was rising, walking out to the backyard to pick something up. The backyard should have been cleared of poop, but it was not. Sounds like you guys need a therapy session. I think we do. I think we do. What's my point? My point is when I look at my employees, I'm like, dude, hello, it's about performance. But when I look at myself, oftentimes it's about my intentions. How about you? How about you? Do you make that same mistake? Well, the challenge with continuous improvement is we can't. We've got to understand individual responsibility and collective accountability and the ramifications of it, right or wrong, good or bad. And we can only judge people on performance, not intention, including ourselves. Including ourselves. Over the next 3 weeks, we're going to talk about a couple of different things that will assist you with this idea of continuous improvement. We're going to talk about how do we prevent burnout and sustain the momentum. We're going to talk about, in a second, code of conduct. And a couple of other tips to put continuous improvement as a part of your toolkit. But this is a big part, performance. It's about performance. Remember, people inherently have value. So I'm not saying that performance is tied to the value of a human being. I'm not saying that. Because human beings are inherently valuable. Whether they act like a jerk or not, they still have value. We're talking about performance. So when we're talking about performance and we're talking about continuous improvement and we're talking about leading other people, then that whole intentions thing and judging people, it's got to be on performance. Nothing else. Remembering that people are inherently valuable. So what's the first step that you can take to establish continuous improvement in your toolkit? Well, I think you got to have a code of conduct. I think you got to have a way that you do business. I think you got to have some kind of true north that establishes, here's what I am, here's who I am, here's how I do things. Now, code of conduct might be trite in today's day and age, values, principles, but here's the simplicity of it. Principles, values, and standards of behavior that guide what I think, say, and do. Think, say, and do. What guides what you think, say, and do? Is there some internal mechanism that you have? Is there some external standard that you have? But as a leader, people need and long for leaders that are consistent, predictable. That doesn't mean you're not an innovator. That just means people like some sense of stability. Yeah, but earlier you said don't be rigid. I'm not talking about being rigid. I'm talking about people know where I stand or what I stand for, and that there's some predictability to my decision making. On a little tangent here, remember that every thought that you think, every word that you speak, every action that you take plants a seed. It plants a seed in the universe. Every thought. Well, every time you think, you plant a seed. So a man thinks, so he is. As a man thinks, so he is. So as you sit down and you have words flying around in your head, they translate into words and action. That's for sure. So if you want to continuously improve, it starts with the way that you think. We talked about that when we talked about systems, and we talked about patterns of thinking, and we talked about innovative thinking. At the end of the day, I hate that verbiage, but you get used to using it, right? It becomes a habit. When you get down to it, I guess, it's going to always be about the way that you think. So what are your patterns of thinking, and are they serving you well? Do you talk to yourself the way you would a precious child or to someone you love? Or do you talk to yourself completely different? I don't know. So the words that you think, How about this? The things that you say. The things that you say. What's your parameters of what you'll say? And what's allowed to be said? What's okay to be said? You know, they say, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. You know what's funny about that? I've ripped my Achilles tendon in two, snapped it, broken my collarbone. I got tendon issues, all from playing sports. But none of those injuries, including the Achilles tendon, which is one of the most painful injuries you could ever have, snapped it in half. None of those hurt as bad as some of the things that people have said to me in my life. And it still linger with me today. You've had the same. So what we say is important. And what are the parameters that we use? What is the code of conduct that we use around what we say or what is said around us? That's a big one. And that's a big one for me. Because as a passionate guy, and an energy guy, and an enthusiasm guy, and a zeal guy, I'm a zeal guy. I'm full of zeal. Well, sometimes that zeal can go off the rail. I mean, it goes off the rail. And that's one of my advantages is my zeal, and one of my downsides is my zeal. Because sometimes I'll say things that are off the rail. They may be rooted in good intention, but when they come out, they just are off the rail. What do you say? And what are the codes of conduct that you use around what you say? And then finally, what do you do? What's within the realm of reasonableness and acceptability for you in what you do? Code of conduct. Well, I would suggest to you, if we're going to be effective leaders and we're going to make continuous improvement a part of our toolkit, I would suggest to you then we've got to have a code of conduct. Intentional. It's an intentional. This is what I am. This is what I stand for. This is how you'll see it every day. What it does for our followers, those that we're charged with leading, our employees, is it gives them some clarity. They get a sense of comfort and stability because they know what to expect. What freaks everybody out is when you got this. When people they don't know what to expect. They don't know how you'll react in a specific instance. I bet you the people that have worked for our organizations for a long time, if you talk to them, if you gave them a scenario, they probably will be able to tell you exactly how I will react. What do you think, Jeff? Yeah, Jeff's like, yep, absolutely. Yeah, because I'm predictable. Now, that's, I hope, intentional because it gives people a sense of knowing where I stand. Right or wrong, good or bad. Now, there's some of that I got to reel in. There's certain things I got to reel in and get better at. And then over a period of time, handle it better so they can know, okay, he's going to handle it better. He's going to handle it better. So how do I establish that code of conduct? Now, it doesn't need to be a long exercise. It's just, in my opinion, 3 questions. Just 3 questions. What are 3 values that I hold dear, and how would you see them in your day? 3 values that I hold dear, and how would you see them in your day? My wife said something to me a while back. She was watching the movie Beverly Hills Cop. You ever seen the movie Beverly Hills Cop? With, what's his name? Eddie Murphy. And she said to me a while back, she said, Ian, you're a lot like Axel Foley. And I said, how am I like Axel Foley? She said, you're well-intentioned, but sometimes you bend the rules. And every time you bend the rules, it kind of gets you in trouble and gets everybody else in trouble. And you look around and say, but I'm well-intentioned. I have a good cause. And she said, you know, you probably need to curb in that Axel Foley streak in you. So, what are 3 values that you hold dear? Well, for me, one of the values that I hold dear was a noble cause. But sometimes in my past, I would say the noble cause justifies goofy approaches that might be outside of the parameters of reasonableness or acceptable practices. But I would justify it because of the noble cause. And the goofiness never was to necessarily benefit me, but I would do some goofy things that were outside of normal practices because it was a noble cause. Axel Foley. Axel Foley. So, 3 values that you hold dear, and how would I see them? So, I share that shortcoming in my own life to be transparent and ask you to look at the shortcomings in your own life and say, it's one thing to have a value, it's another thing I got to see it. So, write down in A there what that value is that you hold dear, but then right next to it, put a dash and then put how people see it every day. Because that's the only part that matters, is the how people see it. I value people, but then I rip people's heads off. Well, that's incongruent. You clearly don't value people, Ian. If you value people, then you won't be full of such zeal when you're so intolerant of people not being willing to try hard. Like, I get really intolerant when people won't try hard. Well, okay, if you value people, you value people, whether they try hard or not. Now, you might motivate them. Ian, you need to listen to your own motivational talk. Yeah. My own flowchart. I'm just being transparent. I'm being honest. And I hope you'll be honest with yourself. So it's not just the value. It's not just the value. It's how will I see it. Is there incongruency? Is there incongruency? Well, one of the things that I value is change. That people are willing to change. And they're willing to get better. They're willing to admit their fault. Well, how would I see that? You're seeing it right now. Freely admit where you've made mistakes and you've stumbled and you've fallen, and then come up with innovative ways to correct that. What are 3 things your coworkers can absolutely expect from you? What are 3 things your coworkers can absolutely expect from you? A smart-ass remark, excuse my language. Can they expect you to be 5 minutes late? What can they absolutely expect? Can they absolutely expect while you're talking to them you'll look at your BlackBerry? Can they absolutely expect that when you're sitting in a meeting you'll move your mouse to see if another email has come in and then grab their attention again, go back to them? Oh, I'm sorry, what'd you say? Can they absolutely expect a kind word? Can they actually expect a listening ear? Can they absolutely expect a problem solving from you, that you'll problem solve for them? Can they absolutely expect that you'll fight for them with your higher ups? What is it? See, I think it's a proactive exercise. I think you have to ask yourself this as a leader. And I think you step forward and say, this is what you can expect from me. I know that that's been a part of what we've done. We tell people what they can expect. Like at the beginning of this program, we told you exactly what you could expect. Then whether we have done it or not, I don't know. Only you can be the judge of that. But we told you what you could expect and what we intended to do. So I think it's proactive because it helps people say, clarity, understanding, I see where we're headed, I understand the journey we're about to go on, I get to understand the kind of leader you are and what you expect, what I can expect from you. So it's easier for me to give you what you might expect of me. And then finally, what are 3 things you absolutely will not tolerate? What are 3 things that no matter what, you're not putting up with that? And then go up to the gray box above. Is that about intention or is that about action? In other words, you absolutely will not tolerate it from somebody else, but are you tolerating it within you? Because one of the challenges is the gap between principle and practice. See, because if there's a significant gap continually between principle and practice, what we say we're about and what we actually do, people won't follow us. People won't give us their allegiance. They won't give us their best. They won't give us all that they have if they've experienced a gap between what we say and what we do. The say-do gap. You may have heard me say that before. The say-do gap. If there is a say-do gap, we are in trouble. There can be, Grant Sawyer, a great governor from the state of Nevada, once said, there can be no gap between principle and practice. Can be no gap between principle and practice. So again, these are intentional, right? Establishing continuous improvement is a part of your toolkit. And then tapping into that whole concept of systems thinking, proactive, holistic systems thinking. Well, both of those 2 things combined would mean that if I'm going to set up a code of conduct, it's going to be proactive. And the reason that I'm going to do that, is because it's the first step towards continuously improving. People aren't going to buy into the idea of continuously improving if they don't see you taking steps to continuously improve. You can't be sitting there barking to everybody else about continuously improving and setting up a culture of continuous improvement if they don't see you role modeling continuous improvement. That's why one of the first exercises I gave you way back 12 weeks ago was send out a survey to your people. And in that survey to your people, do what? Ask them, what am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? Suggestions for my improvement. And then 3, if you could send me back to class, what class would you make me take? If you could send me back to school, what class would you make me take? That was role modeling, the beginnings of continuous improvement. All right, so today was about laying a foundation. Now for the next 3 weeks, and we have a coaching session, the next 3 weeks we're going to unpack these concepts of what are some tools that you could put into your toolkit to continuously improve. And whether that's the code of conduct, whether that's how to beat burnout and sustain the momentum, or whether that's about having some plans and working those plans, like we talked about with maximizing utilization of your time. We're going to unpack these things for the next 3 weeks. But the questions that I asked today are the beginnings of that. The listing of the resources, the listing of the actions, the listing of the steps, and then the questions around code of conduct. These are questions over the next few weeks I would ask you to thoughtfully consider and to answer. Thank you for all that you do. As a mid-level leader, an emerging leader, you're critical to your organizations, and your organizations are critical to your communities. Thanks for all you do. Take care, everybody.